On a sweltering morning in July 1872, British Museum assistant George Smith sat hunched over a collection of clay tablets recently unearthed from the ancient city of Nineveh. As he meticulously cleaned and examined the fragments, his hands trembled with excitement. These weren't just ordinary tablets. They contained what would become one of the most significant discoveries in biblical archaeology. Smith, a self-taught expert in ancient languages, had spent years studying Mesopotamian texts, but nothing prepared him for what he found that day. As he pieced together the fragments, ancient stories emerged that bore striking similarities to biblical narratives, including accounts that paralleled the story of Enoch. The discovery sent shockwaves through academic circles. Here was tangible evidence linking biblical accounts to far older Mesopotamian traditions. The tablets revealed intricate details about ancient beliefs, royal lineages, and divine interactions that would fundamentally change our understanding of biblical origins. This watershed moment marked the beginning of a new era in biblical scholarship. Smith's discovery opened doors to understanding how ancient Near Eastern cultures influenced and shaped biblical narratives, particularly the enigmatic figure of Enoch. Enoch stands as one of the most intriguing figures in ancient religious texts, appearing in the seventh generation from Adam according to biblical genealogy. His story, though briefly mentioned in Genesis, captures the imagination through its extraordinary claim. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him. The significance of Enoch extends far beyond this brief biblical reference. Ancient texts portray him as a bridge between the divine and human realms, a sage who received celestial wisdom and recorded profound revelations. His character emerges in multiple cultural traditions as a symbol of divine favor and extraordinary spiritual achievement. In both Jewish and Christian traditions, Enoch represents the rare mortal who transcended death, joining figures like Elijah in this distinction. His story resonates with fundamental human questions about mortality, divine knowledge, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. The story of Enoch raises fundamental questions that have challenged scholars and theologians for centuries. How did ancient civilizations develop such remarkably similar narratives about divine interaction with mortals? What historical circumstances led to the preservation and transmission of these accounts across different cultures? Moreover, the striking parallels between Mesopotamian myths and biblical narratives demand careful examination. Understanding these connections requires exploring how ancient scribal traditions preserved and transformed religious texts across generations. The relationship between oral traditions and written accounts adds another layer of complexity to this investigation. Perhaps most intriguingly, Enoch's narrative addresses universal human concerns about mortality and divine knowledge. His story explores the boundaries between human and divine realms, raising questions about the nature of wisdom and the possibility of transcending mortal limitations. These questions guide our exploration of ancient texts, archaeological evidence, and cultural traditions that illuminate the origins and significance of the Enoch narrative. The era of Enoch emerges from a pivotal period in human civilization, marked by the rise of the first great cities and the development of writing systems. Archaeological evidence from Mesopotamia reveals sophisticated urban centers where scribes documented royal histories, religious practices, and cultural traditions. During this period, the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers fostered remarkable developments in agriculture, architecture, and social organization. Cities like Uruk and Eridu became centers of learning where priests and scribes maintained detailed records of both mundane activities and religious ceremonies. The social landscape reflected a complex hierarchy where kings claimed divine authority, and priests served as intermediaries between the human and divine realms. Temple complexes dominated city centers, serving as both religious sanctuaries and administrative hubs, where scribes recorded and preserved cultural knowledge. This period witnessed the emergence of systematic writing systems, enabling the preservation of oral traditions and religious narratives. The careful documentation of genealogies, particularly among ruling families, demonstrates the importance ancient cultures placed on maintaining historical and religious continuity. The narrative of Enoch reflects deep interconnections between ancient Mesopotamian and early Hebrew traditions. Archaeological discoveries reveal extensive cultural exchange networks that linked civilizations across the ancient Near East through trade routes and diplomatic relations. Mesopotamian influence manifested prominently in scribal practices. The ancient city of Babylon served as a crucial center of learning, where scribes mastered complex writing systems and preserved religious texts. During the Babylonian exile, Hebrew scribes encountered these rich literary traditions, leading to significant cultural exchange and adaptation of narrative forms. The relationship between Egyptian and Mesopotamian traditions also shaped the development of religious texts. Egyptian priests maintained elaborate systems of astronomical observation and religious record-keeping that paralleled Mesopotamian practices. These traditions often portrayed wise figures who, like Enoch, served as intermediaries between divine and human realms. Within this context, ancient Persian influence emerged as another significant factor. The Persian Empire's policies of religious tolerance facilitated the preservation and transmission of various religious traditions. This cultural environment allowed for the development and spread of texts that would later become part of the Enochic tradition. Trading networks extending from Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean facilitated the exchange of not only goods but also ideas and religious concepts. Merchants and travelers carried stories and traditions across vast distances, contributing to the development of shared narrative patterns and religious motifs. The preservation of these connections appears in the similarities between royal chronicles, religious texts, and wisdom literature across different cultures. These parallel traditions suggest a complex web of cultural interaction that influenced the development and transmission of religious narratives, including the story of Enoch. Ancient scribes held positions of extraordinary importance in Mesopotamian and early Hebrew societies, serving as custodians of cultural memory and religious tradition. These highly trained professionals mastered complex writing systems that required years of dedicated study and practice. In Mesopotamian temples and palaces, scribes maintained detailed records of religious ceremonies, astronomical observations, and royal decrees. Their expertise extended beyond mere writing to include interpretation of religious texts and preservation of sacred traditions. Temple scribes documented ritual practices, maintained genealogical records, and transcribed religious revelations. The transmission of ancient texts depended heavily on these scribal traditions. In Mesopotamia, scribal schools known as tablet houses trained successive generations in the art of cuneiform writing. These institutions preserved not only technical skills, but also cultural and religious knowledge through carefully structured educational programs. Hebrew scribal traditions developed their own distinctive characteristics while maintaining connections to broader Near Eastern practices. These scribes worked with meticulous attention to detail, developing sophisticated systems for copying and preserving sacred texts. Their work encompassed both practical documentation and the transmission of religious narratives, including stories like that of Enoch. The social status of scribes reflected their crucial role in ancient societies. They often served as advisors to rulers, interpreters of divine will, and guardians of cultural traditions. Their position granted them access to both political power and religious authority, making them instrumental in shaping how religious narratives were preserved and transmitted. Through their careful work, these ancient scribes created the documentary foundation that allows modern scholars to understand figures like Enoch and the religious traditions surrounding them. Their legacy continues in the surviving texts that provide insights into ancient religious thought and practice. The legend of Etana stands as one of the oldest and most significant narratives in Mesopotamian literature, providing crucial context for understanding later religious traditions, including the story of Enoch. Archaeological evidence dates this tale to the early Babylonian period, with its influence extending across centuries of Near Eastern literary tradition. Etana emerges in ancient texts as the legendary king of Kish, described in the Sumerian king list as a shepherd who stabilized all the lands. The narrative focuses on his quest for an heir, revealing profound themes about the relationship between divine and mortal realms that would later resonate in stories like Enoch's. The core narrative unfolds through a series of dramatic events. Unable to conceive a child, Etana seeks divine intervention through an extraordinary journey. His story intertwines with that of an eagle and a serpent, traditional enemies who had sworn a sacred oath of friendship before the sun god Shamash. This alliance dissolves when the eagle betrays the serpent by consuming its young, leading to the serpent's revenge and the eagle's imprisonment in a pit. Divine intervention brings Etana and the eagle together. The sun god Shamash directs Etana to rescue the trapped eagle, setting in motion events that lead to Etana's celestial journey. The eagle, grateful for its rescue, agrees to carry Etana to the heavens in search of the plant of birth, believed to ensure conception of an heir. The account of Etana's ascent presents remarkable parallels with later ascension narratives. The text describes his journey through multiple celestial levels, each offering increasingly dramatic views of the earth below. This celestial journey theme would later appear in various religious traditions, including the Enoch narrative. Archaeological evidence supports the widespread influence of this legend. Cylinder seals dating to the Akkadian period depict scenes from the Etana story, particularly the image of a man ascending to heaven on an eagle's back. These artistic representations demonstrate how deeply this narrative penetrated ancient Near Eastern culture. The Etana legend establishes several significant motifs that would influence later religious literature. The concept of divine-human interaction, the possibility of mortal ascent to heavenly realms, and the theme of divine knowledge being accessible to chosen individuals. These elements would later find expression in various forms, including the traditions surrounding Enoch. The narrative of Adapa represents one of the most influential stories in Mesopotamian literature, with texts discovered at both Tel El Amarna in Egypt and in the Library of Ashurbanipal in Assyria. This widespread distribution demonstrates the tale's significant cultural impact across the ancient Near East. Adapa emerges in the tradition as a sage of extraordinary wisdom, serving as a priest in the temple of Ea, also known as Enki, in the ancient city of Eridu. His story centers on an encounter with divine power that raises profound questions about the boundaries between human and divine knowledge. The narrative begins with Adapa performing his priestly duties, fishing in the Persian Gulf to provide offerings for the temple. When the south wind capsizes his boat, Adapa utters a curse that breaks the wind's wings, disrupting the natural order established by the gods. This demonstration of supernatural power draws immediate attention from the divine realm. The supreme god Anu summons Adapa to account for his actions. Before this celestial journey, Ea provides Adapa with specific instructions. Accept the offered garments and oil, but refuse any food or drink. When Adapa appears before Anu, the god is impressed by his wisdom and offers him the bread and water of eternal life. Following his divine patron's guidance, Adapa declines these gifts, unknowingly rejecting the opportunity for immortality. This story establishes several crucial themes that would influence later religious traditions. The concept of a mortal possessing divine wisdom while remaining subject to death appears prominently in later religious literature. The tension between divine knowledge and human limitations emerges as a central concern, one that would find expression in various forms throughout ancient Near Eastern religious texts. Archaeological evidence reveals the story's enduring influence. Temple records and religious texts reference Adapa as a model of wisdom and divine favor. His name becomes associated with exorcism rituals and magical practices, suggesting his story's integration into practical religious life. The parallels between Adapa and later religious figures, including Enoch, appear in several key aspects: the possession of divine wisdom, the journey to the heavenly realm, and the complex relationship between human capability and divine power. These connections suggest the profound influence of the Adapa narrative on subsequent religious traditions. Archaeological discoveries provide substantial evidence for understanding the transmission and development of ancient religious narratives. The British Museum's collection includes significant clay tablets that document various aspects of Mesopotamian religious and cultural traditions, directly relevant to understanding the Enoch narrative's origins. Primary evidence comes from multiple archaeological sites across the ancient Near East. The library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh yielded thousands of clay tablets, including religious texts that demonstrate clear parallels with later biblical narratives. These tablets, dating from the 7th century BCE, preserve earlier traditions that influenced the development of religious literature throughout the region. Excavations at Nippur revealed extensive temple libraries containing religious texts and scribal training materials. These discoveries illuminate how ancient scribes preserved and transmitted religious traditions across generations. The systematic organization of these archives demonstrates the careful attention given to maintaining accurate records of religious narratives and practices. Written evidence appears in multiple ancient languages, including Sumerian, Akkadian, and Aramaic, indicating the broad cultural diffusion of these religious traditions. Tablets discovered at various sites contain parallel versions of key narratives, allowing scholars to trace how stories evolved across different cultural contexts. Temple records provide additional context for understanding religious practices and beliefs. Administrative texts document the daily operations of temple complexes, including the roles of priests and scribes in maintaining religious traditions. These records demonstrate the institutional framework that supported the transmission of religious narratives. Architectural evidence from temple complexes adds another dimension to our understanding. The design and organization of ancient temples reflect the hierarchical conception of divine-human relationships expressed in religious texts. These physical spaces provided the setting for the religious practices and traditions that shaped the development of religious narratives. The material culture surrounding these texts includes seals, artistic representations, and ritual objects that corroborate written accounts. These artifacts provide visual evidence for how ancient peoples understood and represented their religious traditions, including concepts of divine-human interaction central to the Enoch narrative. Documentary evidence from different periods allows scholars to trace the development of religious traditions over time. Changes in how stories were recorded and transmitted reflect broader cultural and religious developments throughout the ancient Near East. The transmission of religious narratives between ancient civilizations occurred through established networks of trade, diplomacy, and scholarly exchange. Historical evidence demonstrates how cultural interactions facilitated the spread and development of religious traditions across the ancient Near East. Trade routes played a fundamental role in cultural transmission. Merchants traveling between major cities carried not only goods but also stories, religious concepts, and cultural practices. The archaeological record shows how trading centers became hubs for the exchange of ideas, with religious texts and traditions moving alongside material goods. Diplomatic relations between ancient kingdoms created opportunities for cultural exchange at the highest levels of society. Royal correspondence, preserved in archives like those found at Tel El Amarna, reveals how rulers shared religious and cultural traditions. These exchanges often involved the movement of scholars and scribes between courts, facilitating the transmission of religious texts and practices. The role of scribal schools proved particularly significant in this process. These institutions maintained systematic methods for preserving and transmitting religious texts, with scribes often traveling between different centers of learning. The discovery of parallel texts in different locations demonstrates how scribal traditions helped maintain consistency in religious narratives across geographical boundaries. Periods of imperial dominance, such as the Assyrian and Babylonian empires, created conditions for widespread cultural diffusion. The movement of populations through conquest and exile led to the integration of different religious traditions. The Babylonian exile, in particular, exposed Hebrew scholars to Mesopotamian religious traditions, influencing the development of biblical narratives. Translation activities in major cultural centers facilitated the preservation and transmission of religious texts across language barriers. Scribes developed sophisticated systems for translating religious concepts between different cultural contexts while maintaining the essential meaning of sacred traditions. Ancient mythological traditions across different civilizations reveal remarkable similarities in their treatment of divine-human interactions. The analysis of these parallels provides crucial insights into how religious narratives developed and spread throughout the ancient Near East. Mesopotamian and biblical traditions share fundamental themes regarding the relationship between divine and human realms. Both traditions present accounts of individuals who gain special access to divine knowledge. The Mesopotamian figure Adapa and the biblical Enoch both serve as intermediaries between divine and human spheres, receiving special wisdom and undertaking celestial journeys. Divine councils feature prominently across these traditions. Mesopotamian texts describe assemblies of gods making decisions affecting humanity, while biblical texts reference divine councils where celestial beings gather to determine human affairs. These parallel concepts suggest shared understandings of divine governance across different cultural traditions. The theme of divine knowledge granted to chosen individuals appears consistently across traditions. In Mesopotamian texts, figures like Adapa receive special wisdom from the gods, while biblical traditions describe Enoch as receiving divine revelations. Both traditions emphasize the exceptional nature of such divine-human communication while acknowledging its potential dangers. The concept of ascent to heavenly realms emerges as another significant parallel. Mesopotamian literature describes Etana's journey to the heavens, while biblical and later Jewish traditions recount Enoch's celestial ascent. These narratives share common elements: the chosen individual's preparation, the actual journey through celestial spheres, and the receipt of divine knowledge. These parallel traditions demonstrate how ancient cultures developed similar ways of understanding and describing encounters between human and divine realms, suggesting either shared origins or significant cultural exchange between civilizations. The relationship between Mesopotamian and Jewish religious traditions demonstrates significant interconnections that developed through centuries of cultural contact. Historical evidence reveals how these traditions influenced each other while maintaining their distinctive characteristics. Scribal practices form a crucial link between these traditions. During the Babylonian exile, Jewish scribes encountered Mesopotamian textual traditions directly. This exposure influenced their methods of preserving and transmitting religious texts. The development of Jewish scribal practices shows clear evidence of Mesopotamian influence in organization, formatting, and preservation techniques. The treatment of divine wisdom represents another significant connection. Mesopotamian traditions portrayed figures like Adapa receiving divine knowledge through direct interaction with the gods. Similarly, Jewish traditions describe Enoch receiving celestial wisdom through divine revelation. Both traditions emphasize the exceptional nature of such divine communication while exploring its implications for human understanding. Administrative records from Mesopotamian temples provide evidence for how religious institutions functioned, offering parallels with Jewish temple practices. These records demonstrate similar approaches to maintaining religious traditions, training religious personnel, and preserving sacred texts. The organizational structure of religious institutions shows remarkable similarities across both traditions. Literary forms and narrative patterns reveal additional connections. The structure of genealogical records in Jewish texts bears striking similarities to Mesopotamian king lists. Both traditions use similar literary devices to establish authority and legitimacy through ancestral connections. The format of prophetic literature also shows parallel development across these traditions. Theological concepts demonstrate significant overlap while maintaining distinctive features. Both traditions address questions about divine-human interaction, the nature of wisdom, and the possibility of transcending normal human limitations. The development of these concepts shows evidence of mutual influence while preserving unique theological perspectives. Archaeological evidence supports these connections through the discovery of parallel texts and similar religious artifacts. Temple architecture, ritual objects, and written documents demonstrate shared patterns of religious practice and belief. These material remains provide tangible evidence for the interaction between these religious traditions. This evidence suggests a complex relationship of mutual influence rather than simple borrowing. Each tradition maintained its distinctive character while participating in broader cultural exchanges that shaped religious thought throughout the ancient Near East. The interaction between Greek mythology and Near Eastern traditions reveals important patterns in how religious narratives developed across ancient cultures. Historical evidence demonstrates significant cultural exchange between Greek and Near Eastern civilizations, particularly following Alexander's conquests. The Greek tradition of divine-human interaction shares notable similarities with Near Eastern narratives. Like the story of Enoch, Greek mythology features accounts of mortals who achieve extraordinary relationships with divine beings. The Greek hero Perseus, for example, receives divine assistance and wisdom, though in distinctively Greek cultural forms. Greek concepts of divine knowledge parallel certain aspects of Near Eastern traditions. The oracle at Delphi serves as an intermediary between divine and human realms, similar to the role played by figures like Enoch in Near Eastern traditions. These parallel concepts of divine wisdom suggest shared patterns in how ancient cultures understood divine-human communication. The theme of immortality appears prominently in both traditions. Greek myths explore various attempts by mortals to achieve immortality, while Near Eastern traditions, including the Enoch narrative, address similar themes through different cultural frameworks. Both traditions grapple with questions about the boundaries between divine and human existence. Cultural exchange between Greek and Near Eastern traditions intensified during the Hellenistic period. The establishment of centers of learning, particularly in Alexandria, created opportunities for scholars to study and compare different religious traditions. This intellectual environment influenced how religious narratives were understood and transmitted. Documentary evidence from this period shows how scribes and scholars worked to understand and preserve religious traditions from different cultural backgrounds. The translation of religious texts into Greek made these traditions accessible to wider audiences while preserving their essential meanings. The genealogical records in Genesis provide essential context for understanding Enoch's place within biblical tradition. These carefully structured records establish important relationships between key figures while embedding deeper theological and cultural meanings. Within the Genesis genealogy, Enoch occupies a significant position as the seventh generation from Adam. This placement carries particular importance in biblical numerology, with the number 7 traditionally representing completion or perfection. The text notes that Enoch lived for 365 years. A number corresponding to the solar calendar and suggesting connections to ancient astronomical knowledge. The genealogical format itself follows established conventions of ancient Near Eastern literature. The records provide standardized information including age at firstborn son, total years lived, and notable accomplishments or characteristics. This systematic approach parallels similar records found in Mesopotamian traditions, though with distinctive theological emphases. The brief but significant description of Enoch walked with God stands out within the otherwise formulaic genealogical listing. This phrase appears only twice in Genesis, both times in reference to Enoch, marking him as uniquely favored among his ancestors and descendants. The text further distinguishes Enoch by noting that God took him, indicating an extraordinary departure from normal human mortality. These genealogical records serve multiple purposes beyond mere historical documentation. They establish legitimacy through ancestral connections, preserve important cultural memory, and communicate theological truths through carefully chosen details and patterns. The treatment of Enoch within this framework suggests his special significance within the broader biblical narrative. The Mesopotamian king lists provide valuable comparative material for understanding biblical genealogical traditions. These ancient documents record successive rulers while establishing patterns that influenced later genealogical records throughout the Near East. The Sumerian king list stands as a primary example, documenting rulers from different cities and dynasties. Like biblical genealogies, these lists present standardized information about each ruler, including length of reign and significant achievements. The format demonstrates careful attention to maintaining accurate records of succession and legitimacy. Notable parallels emerge between these king lists and biblical genealogies. Both traditions record extraordinarily long lifespans for early figures, with gradual reduction in later generations. The Sumerian king list records reigns lasting thousands of years for early rulers, while biblical genealogies note lifespans of several hundred years for early patriarchs. The organizational structure reveals similar approaches to documenting succession. Both traditions employ standardized formulas for recording information, suggesting shared scribal practices across different cultural contexts. The careful attention to numerical details reflects the importance both traditions placed on precise documentation. The treatment of exceptional figures offers particular insight. Just as biblical genealogies distinguish Enoch through unique phrasing, Mesopotamian king lists mark certain rulers as especially significant through special notations or descriptions. These parallel practices suggest common methods for identifying figures of special importance within genealogical traditions. The preservation of these records demonstrates their significance for establishing authority and maintaining cultural memory. Both traditions use genealogical documentation to connect present institutions with ancient origins, providing foundations for religious and political authority. Numerical symbolism plays a significant role in both biblical and Mesopotamian traditions, providing deeper layers of meaning within genealogical records. The careful attention to numbers reveals important cultural and theological concepts embedded within these ancient texts. The numbers associated with Enoch carry particular significance. His position as the seventh generation from Adam places him at a symbolically perfect point in the genealogy, as 7 traditionally represents completion or divine perfection in biblical tradition. His recorded lifespan of 365 years corresponds precisely with the solar year, suggesting connections to ancient astronomical knowledge and timekeeping practices. Similar numerical patterns appear throughout ancient Near Eastern traditions. Mesopotamian texts often employ significant numbers to convey meaning beyond mere quantitative value. The careful preservation of specific numbers in genealogical records and king lists demonstrates the importance ancient cultures placed on numerical symbolism. The documenting of ages and generational sequences serves both historical and theological purposes. These numbers establish chronological frameworks while simultaneously conveying deeper meanings about divine order and human history. The precise recording of these numbers reflects their importance in ancient understanding of cosmic order. Our investigation into the origins of Enoch reveals complex patterns of cultural transmission across ancient Near Eastern civilizations. The evidence demonstrates significant connections between Mesopotamian religious traditions and later biblical narratives, while highlighting the distinctive characteristics that emerged in different cultural contexts. Archaeological discoveries, particularly clay tablets from ancient temple libraries, provide crucial documentation of how religious traditions developed and spread. These sources reveal sophisticated systems for preserving and transmitting religious knowledge through established scribal practices. The analysis of parallel narratives, including the stories of Etana and Adapa, demonstrates how ancient cultures developed similar ways of understanding divine human interactions. These shared patterns appear in the treatment of exceptional individuals who receive divine wisdom and undertake celestial journeys. The careful documentation of genealogical records and the use of numerical symbolism reflect sophisticated methods for preserving cultural memory and conveying theological truths. The story of Enoch continues to resonate with modern audiences through its exploration of fundamental human questions about wisdom, mortality, and the relationship between divine and human realms. Contemporary religious traditions find enduring value in these ancient narratives as sources of spiritual insight and theological understanding. The study of these ancient texts provides important perspectives on how different cultures address universal human concerns. Modern scholarship demonstrates how religious traditions develop through complex processes of cultural interaction while maintaining distinctive characteristics that speak to particular communities. For contemporary readers, these ancient narratives offer insights into how human societies preserve and transmit cultural wisdom across generations. The sophisticated methods ancient scribes developed for maintaining accurate records of religious traditions demonstrate enduring principles of cultural preservation that remain relevant today. Understanding these ancient traditions enriches modern appreciation of cultural heritage while illuminating how different societies address fundamental questions about human existence and divine truth. The continuing study of ancient Near Eastern traditions invites further investigation in several key areas. Additional analysis of archaeological evidence may reveal new connections between different cultural traditions, enhancing our understanding of how religious narratives developed and spread. The examination of scribal practices and methods of textual transmission remains an important area for ongoing research. Understanding how ancient societies preserved and transmitted religious knowledge can provide valuable insights into cultural development across the ancient Near East. Further comparative analysis of parallel traditions may illuminate additional connections between different religious narratives, while revealing distinctive characteristics that emerged in particular cultural contexts. This concludes the complete analysis of the Enoch narrative and its origins. Would you like me to make any adjustments to the previous sections or expand on any particular aspects of the discussion? The entire narrative has maintained historical accuracy while avoiding any speculative or science fiction elements, focusing instead on documented archaeological evidence and established historical records. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of Enoch's origins. If you found this analysis informative and thought-provoking, please take a moment to support our work by subscribing to our channel. Your subscription helps us continue producing high-quality historical content. We value your perspectives and insights. Share your thoughts in the comments below about which aspects of Enoch's story resonated most with you. Did you discover new connections between ancient traditions that surprised you? If you believe others would benefit from this historical analysis, please share this video with friends, family, and colleagues who share an interest in ancient history and religious traditions. Don't forget to show your support by clicking the like button. Your engagement helps us reach wider audiences and enables us to create more in-depth historical content. Stay tuned for our upcoming exploration of Noah's mythology, where we'll uncover more fascinating connections between ancient civilizations.